Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
All right, today we have all the way from the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, Monte Tynes. Monty, I know you're jealous because you can see in my background. I am already at the Passaic and Huntington Beach, so I've come down early to do a little pre-event reconnaissance. So don't be jealous. But how's Mississippi today?
Actually, it's absolutely beautiful, and we're on the water as well. So
So
it's not as
I
pretty
got
as
nothing on you.
California, but it's still pretty nice down here.
Great to hear. Great to hear. I've been in Mississippi before. It's real hot, and I like that movie Burial with Jamie Foxx, and that happened in your town, didn't it?
Yeah, well, the O'Keefes, who that movie's about, they own funeral homes here to this day. Bradford O'Keefe is in Ocean Springs, Biloxi, all along the coast. So they were the plaintiffs in that case.
Yeah, that was a great movie. But anyways, Monte Tynes trial lawyer. So Monty, how long you been at this business for?
20 years.
20 years, you're a baby. But you didn't initially want to become a lawyer. Your initial goal was to become a fighter pilot. So what was so exciting about why'd you want to become a fighter pilot?
Well, I was 6 when Top Gun came out, and when I saw that movie, I was hooked, and I watched that movie pretty much every day for about 4 years when I was in elementary school, and I wanted to be a pilot incredibly bad. Private pilot lessons when I was in high school for a little bit. Didn't get my license, but wanted to be in the military. Played football, soccer, ran track, baseball. So I liked the team orientation of things, and I wanted to kind of I wasn't a good enough athlete to do anything like that in college, but I wanted to continue like having that team atmosphere. So I wanted to go in the military when I graduated from high school.
What happened?
So I went to Georgia Tech on a 3-year ROTC scholarship, and ended up tearing my ACL twice in about 10 months. The ROTC program said that I probably wasn't a good fit anymore, and I wouldn't pass their physical requirements to do what I wanted to do. So they allowed me out of my commitments. And so I finished my school at Georgia Tech in civil engineering. I worked as an engineer while I was in school. So I'll go to school semester and work a semester. I didn't really care for drawing lines on a computer. So my dad was a lawyer, and I knew a lot of lawyers back home in Mississippi. So that's why I decided I wanted to go to law school, or one of the reasons.
Well, that's as good as inspiration as any. I mean, no major injustice you had to overcome that you wanted to just it motivated you. Good news. Well, Monty, this whole piloting thing, I'm working on becoming a private pilot myself, and let me tell you, it ain't easy. And there's a lot going on up in that cockpit, and it's a little scary. And I love when people tell me like, I'm going for a flight lesson, like, be careful. I'm like, really? Be careful? That's some really sound advice. Be careful. Be careful. Great. Thanks a lot. All right. So you go to law school. Where'd you go to law school?
So I went my first 2 years at Mississippi College in Jackson, Mississippi, and I ended up getting married. And my wife at the time, she was in law school at Ole Miss, so I did my last year up at Ole Miss.
All right.
So that was 2002 to 2005. So I graduated in 2005. Instead of attending my graduation, found out my wife had ovarian cancer. So we spent our summer that we were studying for the bar while she was getting treatment for ovarian cancer.
Wow. That was
So
a little different excursion. Monty, when you were in law school, did you take anything like moot court, trial, anything to kind of get you prepared for the stage of the courtroom?
no, because when I was in law school, as I mentioned, after my first year, I worked for a lawyer named Earl Denham and met my first wife at that summer location. So my only focus when I was in law school was driving up to Oxford and her driving back. I wasn't really worried about preparing myself. My goal was to get out and work and
You
get a
weren't
job.
thinking ahead?
I was not. Not
Me
at
neither.
all.
I didn't waste one extra moment in law school. I specifically took classes that did not take attendance. That was key in, like, the description. The
Yeah,
attendance mandatory, that was not for me. Attendance not required, that's my kind of class.
I set up my schedule so I had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I would come back to Jackson on Tuesday morning and leave and go up to Oxford, which Oxford was much, Ole Miss up there, football, baseball, basketball, all that kind of stuff. I'd go back up there on Thursday afternoons.
Sounds good. So when you get out of law school, tell us about your first job.
Yeah, so we moved back right before Hurricane Katrina, took the bar, and got completely wiped out. Everything I owned was destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. I went to work for a lawyer named Charles Wilson doing DUI defense, and like from the moment I got sworn in. So when I found out I got my bar results, he took me to the courthouse, and I got sworn in. A chancellor signed my certificate, and I went directly to justice court and tried 3 DUI trials that afternoon. And from that point on, I was trying DUI cases at least every other day in different courts throughout Mississippi. And I would go all over the state trying DUI cases.
How many DUIs do you think you tried?
There's no way for me to calculate a number of DUIs that I tried working for him. It had to be, these were all bench trials. Most of the time, they only allowed you for an hour or so. And if you requested a jury trial, they would say, "Well, we're not going to give you jail time, so you're not entitled to a jury trial." So I had to try over 100 in the 6 months that I worked for Charles.
That sounds like pretty good training.
Yeah, it was trial by fire.
Trial by fire.
He goes, "Good to see you." He dropped me off the courthouse, and I didn't see him until Christmas. So that was in September. He had a really heavy docket, and it was just, I could not ask for any better way to try to get enveloped in the culture of trying cases.
You said you're there for 6 or 7 months, and then where'd you go to?
So I was in court in Jackson County. That's where my dad practiced law, and he was fixing up his office building that got wiped out from Katrina. And I stopped by his office. He said we're getting ready to move back in. He asked if I would come to work with him in February 2006. I left and went back to work with my dad. Which, when I say back to work, I grew up working in this law firm. I started working there when I was 14 before I could drive, and did every single thing that you could do in a law office, besides, practice law.
Right. I worked for my dad for a couple years, and it was a fucking nightmare. So hopefully your father-son experience was a little more pleasant, because you hear great father-son stories, and mine was not one of them. Was yours a great father-son working experience?
The first 4 years were wonderful. Really, is the best thing I ever did with my dad in my entire life. Those first 4 years. He's 82 now. So he was getting on up there, and he got where it wasn't enjoyable for him. So after a little bit, he
And so
finally
he was
decided.
miserable, and he'd do his best to make you miserable every day. It's a nice way to say it.
Yeah, he retired in June of 2013. I wasn't worried until he was actually retired, and then I was terrified.
What?
Just, the responsibility was mine to make sure that I could support myself and my family, which at that time I had 4 kids, and that's a lot of responsibility, and whole office of 6 people that you got to support their families as well. I did not feel prepared, but I did it anyway.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. All those people counting on you. I used to know what it was like. I have a few people counting on me now, but it's a little easier. But still, it's a lot of pressure when people are counting on you. So, Monty, you recently had honestly, a heroic victory for a poor fellow who was wrongfully convicted with the most craziest story. So, on a murder trial, because you must be one of the most brilliant trial lawyers, because you try murder cases and products liabilities and medical malpractice and car wrecks, and that's like, it hurts my head to think about all the stuff you have to know. But let's talk about this murder case, because this is fascinating. Tell us about this murder trial.
On October the 23rd of 2008, a gentleman and his wife pulled into a gas station to ask directions to a football stadium because they were going to see their grandson play football. The gentleman got out of his car, went in the gas station, and he was coming out. Wife noticed 3 individuals in front of her car, and she kind of locked eyes with one of them. The other 2 kind of disappeared from her, and then she noticed something going on in the back of the car. He got into the car and was fighting off 2 individuals. And he pulled the door shut, and while he was holding the door shut with one arm, put it in gear, and the 3rd individual came up and shot him as he was driving off. So he drove down the road and ended up dying in his wife's arm. A few days later, the Moss Point Police Department arrested 4 young individuals for questioning in connection with the murder. One of them was Tevin Benjamin. He was 14 at the time. And he had just turned 14. The other ones were 15, 16, and 17, all getting ready to turn 16, 17, and 18. It's kind of important to the story is the age of these individuals. So when they were arrested, the cops took statements from each and every one of them, except for Tevin Benjamin, who I was later appointed to represent. Tevin asked for his lawyer, said he didn't want to give a statement, and he asked for a lawyer. So the police officers contacted his mom, gave his mom a pizza, and told his mom to go in there. If he would give a statement to him, that he would get to go home. And so his mom went in. She was a single mom, worked 2 jobs, real hard worker. She went in there and told her son, because all this is on video recording, told her son that he needed to talk to the police, tell them everything they wanted to know. And so then the officers came in, and the officers carried on conversation a little bit, and they asked him where he was the Thursday night before. And he said, I was at the fair, which wasn't untrue. He did go to the fair that night. So they were like, well, you're lying to us. We know that you were at this gas station where this guy was shot. And so Tevin asked for his lawyer again. That's where the interview stopped. So the oldest, the only one that was eligible for the death penalty, he pled to accessory after the fact and testified against the other 3 individuals. The admitted shooter was the next one that was tried, and he was convicted of depraved heart murder, not capital murder, which capital murder is, a murder in the commission of a dangerous felony. The next individual was tried for capital murder and convicted, and then they saved our case for the last case. And of course, I was just 4 years out of law school when this first case was tried. We asserted change of venue, so we went up to Vicksburg, Mississippi, and we spent 3 days trying to pick a jury, which we couldn't get a jury sat, so we had a mistrial. We waived change of venue, and because I had co-counsel, Dustin Thomas was my co-counsel on that case, and he had tried a bunch of murder cases. We tried that case for a week. The key piece of evidence against Tevin was what the prosecution said was that he lied to police officers in his interview. So he was the 3rd individual, the one involved.
Was he there?
He was there. He was there. All 4 of them were at the scene, but the victim, she described 3 black males in their early to mid 20s as the individuals involved. So, and Tevin had just turned 14. So that's going to be kind of a key fact later on. When he was convicted the first go around, when the jury stayed out almost a full day, and when all of the jurors came back in and sat down, 3 of them were crying. When they read the verdict and the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, all 12 started crying. Felt like we tried a good case, that they didn't feel like they wanted to convict him because, why, if they had that kind of reaction, would they want to convict him? But so for the next 6 years, a 14-year-old boy went to some of the toughest prisons in Mississippi. Prisons that were in the middle of the Mississippi Delta were super hot, humid, and don't have air conditions. Eventually, the Supreme Court reversed the case, and it got sent back for a new trial.
Did you handle the appeal?
I did not handle the appeal, so they could argue ineffective assistance of counsel. So another lawyer that handled the appeal, he's kind of famous for a case that got made famous on a podcast called In the Dark Season 2. Curtis Flowers, who was tried 5 or 6 times for murder and convicted, and a few hung juries and stuff. And the Supreme Court last couple of years reversed his conviction, and he'd been set free. He was the same one that handled the appeal for Tevin's case, and he didn't argue ineffective assistance of counsel. So, that was good.
Dodged a bullet, career-wise. All right, so you try this case again?
So we asserted change of venue again, and we went up to Oxford, Mississippi, where I went to law school. And the funny, curious thing about this whole deal is my wife was an assistant district attorney in the same office that was prosecuting Tevin.
Now, which wife is this? It seems like you've had more than one.
This is my second wife.
Okay.
My
Not
wonderful
your
wife.
practice wife. Your wife for the long term this time.
For
This
the long
forever
term.
means forever this time.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So she's an amazing lawyer as well. But she was an assistant district attorney at the time for the same office that was prosecuting Tevin. We go up to Oxford, Mississippi, in this absolutely beautiful courthouse in the middle of a town square, just like you would imagine in John Grisham books. It's super cool.
What year are we in now?
This was 2014, 2015.
That's when you did the retrial.
That's when we did the retrial, and we tried that case for a week. The jury we tried it for 4 days, and we gave it to the jury on a Thursday afternoon. This setup, it's this old courthouse, and the jail cell that they keep the prisoners in while they're waiting is right next to the jury deliberation room. And so Tevin, when he was back there, could hear all of the deliberations, every bit of them. We got to know Tevin really well. I mean, I thought the world of Tevin. We'd go get him food because he didn't like the jail food, and we'd try to keep him in the courtroom so he could socialize, so he wouldn't have to be behind bars. Well, it was odd because he wanted to go back to his cell while we were waiting on deliberations, and it was because he could hear the deliberations. So they broke after about 2 hours the next morning. When we came back, one of the jurors did not come back. And so the judge, who was a former prosecutor, former DA, all that kind of stuff, he's like, so y'all are going to get a win out of this. It's going to be a mistrial. We're going to have to do this all again. And he was acting like we would think that would be a win for a mistrial. Tevin was super upset that this guy wasn't back. And so we started talking to him. We found out the count was 10 to 2 in favor of not guilty. So Tevin knew what the count was. So he's like, we got to get this guy back. And so we convinced the judge to send the sheriff, who was the longest service sheriff in the entire United States at the time, to go get the juror. And he had just overslept, and they got him. They came back 2 hours later, got a not guilty verdict. It was just a really, really, really neat.
But it didn't end there, because then you had to go get some compensation.
So it didn't end there. After that, we filed what's called a petition for compensation under the Mississippi wrongful conviction statute, which at the time we filed it, you did not get a jury trial. You only got a bench trial. And it got assigned to the same judge that heard Tevin's 3 trials and the same judge that heard the other 2 murder trials on this case. So we were trying to figure out what was going, how to try to maneuver around that situation. And then Tevin gets arrested again for a carjacking. He bonds out, gets arrested again for robbery and possession, and pleads guilty to those, and ends up going to prison again. So he spent 6 years in prison from 14 to 20. Gets out for a little over a year, had his 21st birthday party at my office, and gets arrested and sent to prison. I think his sentence was 18 years on that.
He's still there now.
He's still there now.
So you had to try your compensation case with Kevin behind bars. Is that right?
Yeah. So they transported him for the trial, and there was a long delay. So from 2014 to 2025 is when we finally got it to trial, and it was tough, really tough to wait that long and have it keep being continued over and over again. But one of the things that happened in the meantime is the Mississippi Supreme Court said you get a jury trial on this. So that excited me, is that we got a jury trial. So January of this year, 2025, so 11 years after the not guilty, we had a trial on the wrongful conviction.
And what was the results of the trial?
So, and the judge, the entire time, told me I was wasting everybody's time on having this trial. But we ended up getting a verdict, and we had to prove that he was not guilty. That is an element of the proof that he was not guilty. And we got a verdict that a plaintiff's verdict on that case. They didn't, the compensation is determined by statute. You get a certain amount per year, so they didn't award any money on that. But
What was the total compensation?
yeah, the total compensation is going to be about $360,000 for Tevin for his wrongful conviction and incarceration for 6 years. But in the evidence, we had 3 witnesses. Our second witness, the judge completely struck and told the juror not to consider any of that testimony.
Why is that?
Because he was one of the people convicted. He was the one convicted of capital murder, and he started screaming and yelling at the assistant attorney general that was defending the case during his cross-examination. So the judge struck his testimony because he was being uncooperative. They were able to get into the fact that he was convicted of 2 crimes when he got out of prison that were extremely, extremely similar to the crime that he was convicted of for the capital murder.
Wow.
So
it's amazing. Prevailed. And then you, being the great businessman you are, chose not to take a fee out of that $360,000 that you worked 11 years for and did the case basically as a court-appointed attorney.
Well, not exactly, because there's attorney's fees that are applied
Statutory.
by statute. So
got it. Oh, so by statute, he gets his money and you get fees to collect it.
Yeah.
Got it. What a nightmare for whatever fees you got. That's all I can say. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work, Monty. So in addition to killing yourself on these crazy criminal cases, you got some, products liability, because that's what you're going to be teaching about. What kind of products liability cases have you handled?
All the products cases that I handle are kind of what I call one-off products cases or single event products cases where there's not like a class action or mass tort or a team of lawyers doing discovery and finding everything that you need to finding all the evidence that you need to win the case. So I do it all myself. Me and Courtney Wilson, who's my law partner, we go through all the documents and do everything and figure out how to win these cases ourselves. And we've been really, really successful at doing that.
So in Huntington Beach, you're going to be teaching a workshop, helping lawyers learn to do what?
The thing is finding the gold to help you win your products case. So we're going to teach people how to go find the evidence that you need, because you can't win cases without evidence that you need to win the cases. Because if you don't have evidence, you ain't going to keep a verdict, no matter, even if you get to go to a jury. So there's a lot of different ways to find the evidence. And once you find the evidence, how to flip it and present it in a way that is compelling through demonstrative evidence. We've developed a process to find that evidence and then the best way to use that evidence.
So give me an example of what you're talking about.
So one of the things that we've kind of fallen into is products cases sometimes are kind of hidden in other cases. One case that we had a med mal case. We were suing a hospital and a doctor as a result of an injury that occurred to a lady's genitals while she was having a leg surgery. We filed suit. Into it, we found out really the real problem with the case was the surgical table that they were doing the surgery on had a propensity to cause genital injuries. And there's research out there and how to develop that, find the evidence that's compelling, and how to sift through all the information to present it correctly.
Got it.
The highlight of TLU for me was having the opportunity to network with attorneys from out of state.
TLU has been amazing. I'm so glad I came. It was one of the most inspiring events I've been to. Great networking, great food. It's been amazing. I can't wait for next year.
How many TLU beaches have you been to?
This is only going to be my second TLU beach, but I've been to 2 Vegas TLUs, the New York TLU. I just didn't go to the first Huntington Beach, I guess, and the second one that was in the same general area. I'm not real familiar with California geography, so.
It's all right, buddy. Well, great news is, well, you're at last year's. Last year was awesome. That was my favorite event ever. So of course we have to outdo ourselves in 2025, and we have lots of new presenters coming from around the country, which I'm stoked about. But one thing I'm really stoked about, besides because it's gonna be like similar, because we're gonna have full breakfast, full lunch prior to the event. On Tuesday, June 3rd, Ed Saramboli's taking people to surf camp. On Wednesday, June 4th, Kurt Zahner's taking 20 people out to race go-karts. So we got some fun pre-conference activities. But one thing I'm really stoked about, above all else, is that we're gonna have a live voir dire focus group track. So Joe Freed's gonna be doing a focus group jury selection on an actual trial of a motorcycle hitting a semi-truck, and the guy dying. And of course, he's got drugs in his system and not wearing a helmet. So having to deal with all those issues. And then I'm going to record these too, both the jury and the lawyer, because they're going to be in small rooms, only 20 people can attend this class. But Joe's going to meet with people ahead of time, kind of go over the case, go over his philosophy on voir dire, how he thinks about it, how he frames issues. And then, for 2 hours, people will sit and watch an actual jury selection. And then for an hour after it, he's going to break down, and analyze what he did and how he did it. So, and then there's going to be some people that are going to be on the jury. Each jury will have 9 focus group jurors and 3 lawyers. So that way, the lawyers get the experience of what it's like to be on a jury. They get to act if things get to be too kumbaya-ish, sometimes focus groups get when you're paying people, they're all like, oh, $100 million, no problem. You got the people saying the top, the lawyers speak up and be like, oh, that's a crazy amount of money. Or, you sound like a greedy lawyer. Or how's the money going to help anybody? Or money's not going to bring that person back. It's blood money. Or, these kinds of lawsuits are what's, causes our insurance premiums to go up. Or all the crazy stuff that people say that kind of, you have to take in, and you also have to work with, right? I mean, somebody tells you that's a crazy amount of money. Well, what are you gonna do? Just kick the person off the jury? Instead of saying, hey, meeting the, actually showing people how to meet the resistance. You know what? That's a valid point you bring up. Can you tell us what's behind those feelings? And then who else feels like Monte that, this is crazy? Whatever it is, the moves. And so you get to witness it live. So I got Joe Freed doing trucking. I got Nick Raleigh doing a TBI trial or TBI case. It's actually a verdict he just got 2 months ago for $23 million. We had a lot of difficulties, a 10-year-old case. And then Ben Rabinowitz is doing it, Kurt Zahner on premises. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be morning and afternoon for all 4 days. And so I'm going to have some great voir dire training at TLU Beach and for TLU On Demand. What do you think about that, Monty?
Sounds exciting.
I think it's going to be really exciting because I always got to come up with new and exciting ideas. And, we're going to have theme parties. Don't forget about the theme parties. They're so much fun. We're going to have a Elvis and Marilyn party, a 70s disco party, and a Rock of Ages party, which means you get to be your favorite rock star, dress up as your favorite rock star, and sing karaoke as your favorite rock star. Tell me it doesn't get better from a social and fun standpoint. It doesn't. Anyways.
I know Dan loves his parties.
How much fun did you have at TLU Beach last year? I mean, you were there.
I actually had a blast. I just wasn't prepared. I'm a South Mississippi boy. I wasn't prepared for kind of how chilly it is in the morning out there in June.
Yeah, buddy. It's get a little June gloom. Gotta I like nice overcast skies when we're in class. This isn't a beach. This isn't hang out and go to the beach. This is at the beach, but it's not a quote unquote beach party, Monty. Okay, let's get our bearings straight. You with me?
I'm with you.
It's going to be awesome, though. So remember that. I hope there's a lot of people come from Mississippi. I checked the registration. We don't have that many, so you got to be letting your friends know in Mississippi they got to come out to the beach because it's going to be awesome. Just saying. So, Monty, out of this great success you had, but tell us, what would you say is your most devastating loss? The one that eats at your craw that you just can't believe you lost it.
So 2019, I tried a birth injury case of a young girl that was breached. It was a breech C-section, and the doctor hyperextended the baby's neck, caused her to be paralyzed from the chest down. There was a video of the birth, a video of the actual incident that caused the hyperextension. We tried that case in 2019. And got a defense verdict. Pretty quick defense verdict, actually. That case eats at me every single day.
And why do you think you lost it?
I think there's a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because
Wait, I got a better question for you. What did you learn from that loss? That's a better question.
So I learned that not always the best evidence that you think is the best evidence is the best evidence. And sometimes when you do focus groups, no matter how many times you do them and how long you've done them, you can put your thumb on the scale in the focus groups. So you have to be really, really careful. What we took away from all our focus groups that we did on that case was we thought that the video was clear, that when the doctor did this, he injured the baby's neck, and that's what caused the paralysis. What we found out from the verdict is, and what we learned is, no, it wasn't clear. There were signs in some of the focus groups that it wasn't clear. And the way that we presented it in opening statement, after the defense presented their case in opening statement, we just couldn't recover. If we would have done a better job with the video in opening statement, I think we might have had a better chance of winning. You never know what's going to happen. I know that there's so many different things that happen in that case that eat at me every day, and that I've taken away and tried to do better.
Speaking of doing better, what do you like? What kinds of things are you doing on a daily or regular basis to improve your skills as a trial lawyer?
Well, luckily I came across TLU. I watch an amazing amount of the catalog because I'd tried a number of different types of cases, whether they be medical malpractice cases, products cases, general negligence, car wreck cases. And the one thing about TLU on demand is when you have something coming up, you can see how a bunch of different people attack that issue. You can take what fits and what doesn't fit. Since I discovered TLU, I haven't missed a conference, go out and get to meet what I think you call the Titans. These people have been invaluable of helping me learn and become a better lawyer and how to deal with different situations, how to refine my craft. We make it a point of practicing everything that we do, recording it, trying to get as much critique as we possibly can, whether it be openings, voir dire, cross-examinations, closings. You cannot just walk into a courtroom and think that you're going to just win because the facts or whatever are on your side. It just doesn't work like that. If you aren't ready to go and have done all the hard work and preparation, but done it the right way so that you make a seamless presentation in front of the jury. Because one of the things that I learned in that case and a couple other cases that I lost is when you're not seamless, you're wasting their time. And if you're wasting people that are sacrificing their time, they're going to punish you for it.
Yeah, we do not want to be. We need the jury to be punishing the defense, not the plaintiff, not our side. So we agree on that. So I'm so glad I didn't know you used to tell you on that demand that much, but I'm really glad you have because, like, I keep trying to make it better. You know, it's an app for your phone now. Have you used the Chat GPT feature on the desktop version yet?
I haven't because I am so familiar with it. And whether I want to watch Nick Rowley or Brian Panish or Sean Claggett, who I've known Sean since 2013 or 14.
Right, you guys were reptile guys together, right?
Yeah, I met him in Atlanta. I think it was when I was preparing for a case against. I had a group of cases against a dirty sheriff of Jackson County. And I met him, and he taught me how to do focus groups.
Shooting a sheriff in Jackson County, you might as well shoot Trump in Jackson County.
Yeah, it was a brutal road, but you know, at least one case we came out on top.
Would you tell me you sued the same sheriff 11 times?
Yeah, and he ended up getting indicted and prosecuted as well.
You tipped off the feds. We had a dirty sheriff in town with all your lawsuits.
Yeah, I think we helped cultivate a lot of the witnesses. Just kept suing them.
What was he doing that was dirty?
Man, he had a little goon squad, used the sheriff's funds and all the equipment kind of as his little personal kind of piggyback. He tried to exert pressure on people, you know, all kinds of stuff.
Did I read about this guy in like the New York Times?
I don't know. Mike Bird, he's pretty prolific in all the stuff. He was indicted 31 or 32 counts in state court and 2 counts in federal court for, you know, really kicking somebody in the balls when they were handcuffed.
Is
It
he
was
in
home.
prison?
Well, he's dead now, so he died of COVID.
Wow, too bad. Very sad.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe there's another benefit of COVID besides TLU, the sheriff dying. That's not very nice, but true. Maybe not be nice, but true.
And so you have to practice in the deposition. You practice in motion hearings. You practice at the grocery store. That's why you have a family. You practice on them. You have to keep the skill up or it erodes. It's simple as that.
Somebody give us an overview of this case.
Or I call wowing it. And what I mean by wisdom of the wise is, why are we still right in spite of this fact?
These are just some of the clips when I was cross-examined 10 years ago, remember that.
About 11 o'clock at night, and he leaves this message. I got a brilliant idea. Every conversation he starts, I have a brilliant idea.
Well, welcome everybody. We've got a good crowd here today.
So TLU on demand, and you were a reptile guy for a long time, right? So that's when you. How long were you doing that for? Or are you still doing? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I still, I still got a couple of cases that I'm working with Don Keenan on. I went and talked at their MedMal seminar in February.
All right, so you see?
Yeah, and I was the dean of the damages college.
Does he know you come to TLU? Because I know he's doesn't play well with others.
Yeah, I don't know.
Better keep this on the down low.
I don't. Oh, does he know that I'm coming to TLU? That's if he does, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I don't call
Brian
him.
Crockett came to TLU. He kicked him off the reptile. Satch, we got a lot of former reptile guys that no longer allowed to be there.
I did learn a significant amount from Don Keenan, as well as a lot of other people.
Who would you say is your mentor? If you had to choose, who's my mentors? Who are your mentors?
So one of the main mentors is a guy named Earl Denham. I worked for him after my first year in law school. He was an interesting character. He was an ultimate plaintiff's lawyer. He's an odd character. I learned so much from him. I never worked for him after law school, but I was very close friends with him, and he is who I would say was my mentor as far as a plaintiff's lawyer, and my first mentor that kind of took me under his wing and helped me, find the passion for plaintiff's law that I have now.
Let's say a young lawyer comes to you, Monty, and he says, hey, man, I really want to be a trial lawyer. I want to be a plaintiff's trial lawyer, but there's just so much information out there. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to look. I don't know how to get started because, it's a big task to learn to become a trial lawyer. What advice do you give him, Monty?
Besides the obvious of joining TLU, going to the TLU, because that's without saying. You have to find somebody that you respect and that knows what they're doing to act as your mentor. You have to really actually care about your clients. If you don't, and you don't put in the time to get to know them, you're never actually going to be successful as a plaintiff's lawyer. The last thing is you have to do the hard. It's not enough just to do the legal work, just to do the interrogatories, responses, the research and the response to all the motions and all that kind of stuff, and going and taking the depositions. Just doing that doesn't get you there. It doesn't even make you a decent trial lawyer. You have to do all the hard work outside of it, trying to figure out how everything's going to be presented to a jury. And that they don't teach in law schools. They don't teach at most CLEs. You have to find out what you have to present to a jury so that you can do a good job for your clients and win your cases. Because ultimately what we do, we have to do in a way that is favorable for a jury, and so the jury will find for us. The only way to do that is to put in the extra work outside of your normal job and going to different conferences like TLU and learning from the best of the best of the best, and they're all in one place at TLU.
That's right. And we got 4 lecture tracks and 8 workshop tracks. And the workshops, we were doing small group training, because I teach my stuff at my boot camps on presentation skills. Like we use now to teach, we use this motorcycle hit in a truck, wrongful death case, to teach the presentation skills and how to use visuals, voir dire skills, the eye contact, the hand movement, the voice control, the, emotional state control, glance control, like everything has to be intentional. And, and obviously in cross-examination, and just so you might want to check your calendar, Monty, August 13th through 16th. I got a boot coming up with our good friend Joe Freed on trucking. Because there's still like 6 spots left in that one because they're limited to 10 people. But I am super stoked for that class because Joe's been like, a friend and mentor of mine since, I met him back at the Trial Lawyers College. It's had a huge impact on my life, and I'm so grateful. And it's, because like when people ask me like, hey, especially a lot of these people that have sons and daughters that are just becoming lawyers, they're like, what advice? I'm like, it's simple, that this is the greatest time ever for, people to become trial lawyers. And I met somebody yesterday, they've been a lawyer 3 months. I'm like, you're so lucky. And they're like, so scared. Like, I don't know anything. I'm like, I know you don't know anything, but the fact is everything you need to know and you want to know is accessible, if you develop a process to learn it and, decide what skills and, take it one chunk at a time and start learning trial strategy by watching TLU on demand, by, reading books, and then actually, learn the presentation skills of performance because because it takes 3 things to get big verdicts. What do you think those are, Monty? 3 things for big verdicts.
Hard work.
No, because you can work your ass off and get shit. That was my life for 20 years. So hard work is exhausting. It's hard. That's not one of them. Now you have to work. Don't get me wrong. You have to put the hours in, and there's a lot of them, but keep going.
Hard work, connection with people, connection with the jury.
Okay, so we're going to put connection in performance skills. Yes, you have to be able to tell a story the jury's connected to. You have to connect with the jury as a trial lawyer. That's the key element that all great trial lawyers have in common. They all connect with the jury. I'm going to help you out, Monty. You got to have a good case. I thought you would start that. It means good damages, good liability, a big insurance policy, and a credible plaintiff. That makes a good case. You got to have great trial strategy, which means you got to know what experts to hire. You got to know how to do depositions and get sound bites. You got to know how to sequence witnesses. You got to know how to structure questions on cross-examination, how to structure opening statements and closing arguments, what visuals to use. There is a ton of trial strategy, and that's all conscious decisions. That's why we go to conferences. That's why we do focus groups. That's why we hire trial consultants to learn trial strategy. But the third thing we talked about, presence or performance skills. So those are the 3 things that a young person needs to get and to master. But also you need to go to conferences. People that don't go to conferences, they blow my mind. Like, that probably 95% of the lawyers never leave their states, never leave their state conferences. Those people you see at the Mississippi Association of Justice, 95% of them have never left that state to learn something.
To just tie that example up, when I practiced law with my dad, when I had to get my CLE hours at the local Jackson County Bar Association CLE that was free. He didn't believe in going to conferences. And when my dad retired, the first thing I did was book a trip to Las Vegas to go to my first reptile conference. And that was in November of 2013.
Right. And think about all the people, not just what you learned from, the teaching there, but all the people you became friends with, like the Claggets, like, did you know Satch Oliver from there?
I never met Satch, but I've met so many people at all the reptile conferences I went to, the reptile colleges that I taught, and all the people that I've met and come in contact with at TLU. Actually, when we go to Huntington Beach, my oldest son is in law school, so he's going to come out there with me. So I'm excited.
Oh, isn't that so exciting that your son that's in law school, because we do a lot of law student scholarships for needy law students, not for law students of big successful trial lawyers. But no, it's great though, because then they fill out applications, but then they have to volunteer 2 hours a day. So that way, they have to pay something. This can't be a free lunch. You teach people free lunch. People who get something for nothing, that's how they treat it. But it's great because we have them like working at the the check-in or just helping things that are interactive with the lawyers that are there, because that way they get to meet the lawyers and talk to the lawyers and get connected with the lawyers, which is really critical, because I go to I was just at the TBI Med Legal Conference, and, they got some law students there, but these law students, they all hang out by themselves because they don't know anybody and they're scared to death, right? They don't, for the most part, walk up and say, hey, I'm Dan. Who are you? I'm a law student. They sit there and they chat with themselves. So
when I first went to the first TLU in Vegas that I went to, it was intimidating for me, and I had been practicing law for 17 years, 16, 17 years. I can't even imagine how intimidating. I mean, because it's kind of a big deal. The show that you put on is impressive. Just the way it's structured, much less all these lawyers from all over the country. And I can imagine law students just being intimidated to talk to lawyers, much less all of these lawyers and some of these gigantics in our bar.
Yeah, some of the rock stars. Oh, because Nick Raleigh, speaking of rock stars, he's got a $44 million verdict yesterday. And then 2 weeks ago, he got a $50 million verdict against Starbucks. And then 2 weeks before that, a $24 million verdict on a TBI case. It's a really impressive run. And I'm pretty stoked about the case, especially stoked for yesterday because he did it with a buddy of mine, Michael Carrillo, brought him in, and Keith Bruno and Courtney. So the four of them tried this, a teacher sexually assaulting young children and against the county of Los Angeles, and got a $44 million verdict. But I worked on that case 4 years ago. I worked on that case, consulting with my buddy, helping him prep witnesses, helping put his stuff together. And then the case got mistried. They went to the Supreme Court. They got changed some rulings, but the rulings weren't good enough because they're allowing evidence in of this child being molested again after this teacher molested the child.
Because that sounds super relevant,
Well, because obviously it's pretty prejudicial. And then, but he wasn't happy with the ruling from the court. He actually went and got the law changed at the legislature and then went back to trial. That's impressive. So anyways, his buddy's named Michael Carrillo. So he's going to come and present on this case because this was an ordeal. I mean, think about the ordeal. And he had the worst judge in all of Los Angeles, Mary Ann Murphy. She's been 40 years. She's she is hell in a courtroom, just so disrespectful, so demeaning, so mean, she's horrible. And Raleigh filed after first day because she was he thought maybe perhaps she would be civilized. No, she was just as ugly and horrible. So he filed this motion disqualifier and had 30 lawyers that gave statements in it about how she'd been abusive, racist, just who she was. And actually, it changed her demeanor for a little while, I heard. And then she went back to being the horrible human being that she is at her core. And
hard to keep that pressed down.
Oh, yeah. But they overcame all of that and got a $44 million verdict. So, because I was so crazy because I just called my buddy up out of the blue because I saw us posted something on Facebook or something. And I'm shooting the shit with him. And I'm like, hey, whatever happened to that case that I helped you on 4 years ago? He goes, I'm going to trial with it next week with Raleigh. I'm like, dope. All right. Because, it's on contingency. So I'm like, maybe. And then I call Raleigh up and I tell him the story. He's like, well, you must feel better about your contingency now. And I'm like, matter of fact, I do. I do. So it was quite a journey. Quite a journey.
Was it on TVN?
No, I don't think they put those sex assault case there, but his Starbucks hot coffee one was on CVN, and so was the one right before that. And all three of these trials were on the same floor, I think, of the same courthouse in downtown Los Angeles. So that's why I got to move back to LA so I could be around.
You moving from Vegas?
Hell yeah, buddy. Back to California. Look at outside my window. What are you, blind? You don't see the palm trees of the ocean? We ain't got that in Vegas. Vegas is all right, but it's a little bit too much weather swings. It's way too hot. There's no oceans, and there's not nearly as much to do. And I got a lot of friends, and more importantly, I'm barred in California, Monty. I'm coming back to. You're about to meet Dan Ambrose, trial lawyer.
I thought you just got your dojo finished.
I'm working on it. I still got to finish remodeling the other half of it, but it'll be done. But you know what? I'll still keep the dojo. Go out there and do the train once a month. But I'm a beach guy. I'm an LA guy. That's where I belong, and that's where I can try cases, because I got to try cases, Monty. I can't handle all these people getting these massive verdicts, and me doing webinars about them ain't as much fun as being in the courtroom and having the jury, read the numbers off. I would imagine, not for me at least.
Truly amazing feeling. We are lucky to get to do this.
Nobody knows what that moments are like, waiting for that jury. And what that moment's like when that foreman stands up and the judge says, "Do you have a verdict?" The myriad of emotions that go through the trial lawyer, only a trial lawyer would know. Not describable to regular human beings. And, for some folks, it's like a drug. Like Panish, he's like, can't get to trial. It's like, I want to get to trial. His Panish is like, I want to try a murder case. I'm like, oh, I'm sure some criminal defense lawyer would love to have you be their co-counsel.
But really, it's hard sometimes to get to trial. I had about 2 years ago, I tried like 14 cases in a little over a year, but since then, I've only been able to try like 3 cases a year. It's really difficult sometimes.
How many cases think you tried?
I've tried 37 jury trials.
Roughly 37. I'm joking.
37 jury trials. I've tried thousands of DUIs and other criminal defense, and God knows how many domestic cases, because I did that for a long time too.
Oh, you got a real, must be down living in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. Requires you to have a more diverse practice.
Yeah, it does.
Especially in the early years to keep the lights on. Keep the family fed.
Sometimes it was difficult to keep the lights on, but it's a little different story now. So we
Thank God.
kind of focus now.
Good. Thank God, because we're waiting for you to come to boot camp, Monty. It's going to be awesome when you do.
I've been wanting to do it for forever.
It's going to be amazing, and we're so much better. Like every time we do it, we get a little bit better. But Monty, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you my cross-examination, because I end every podcast with cross-examination at the end. So that way, anybody wants to listen to it, they can get us to one more rep, hear it, see if they, you know what I mean? Because the repetition, hopefully by this time, it's probably been 15 episodes. I've done this cross at the end. So hopefully people that do connect with it are practicing it. And the cadence as it goes along, hopefully. But so Monty, I think I might have showed this to you, but I'm going to show it to you one more time. Are you ready? Oh, Monty, before I show it to you, how do people get a hold of Monte Tynes if they got a problem in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi?
Yeah, my cell phone number.
They just want to say, hi, Monty. I haven't seen you so fucking long. What's up? That's what I do. I call people up and be like, what's up? Like, what do you want? I'm like, I don't want anything. I'm just checking to see how the fuck you're doing.
Yep. And so my cell phone's 228-860-0227. My email is Monte, MONTE, at Tynes, TYNES, lawfirm.com. Shoot me an email, send me a text, give me a call anytime.
Anytime. And obviously, everybody knows to get a hold of me. My cell phone's the easiest way. 808-3130. Oh, it's 248-808-3130. And if anybody, or my email is dan@triallawyersuniversity.com. But if anybody wants because you were talking about TLU on demand. So if they don't have TLU on demand, you want to, try it out, get some temporary access, see if you use it, hit me up. I'll send you that. Or if you want a copy of this cross-examination we're about to do, hit me up and I'll send you this too. Because this cross we're doing, Monty, out of all the things I've ever developed for the plaintiff's bar, I think this is one of the most valuable, because people really need help at cross. I just think it's like a natural thing, but I read people's crosses and then I talk to them like, what did you do to prepare for your cross? Nothing. I wrote out some questions, some topics. I'm like, do you think it was all just going to come to you? Do you think it was all just going to intuit into your brain? You didn't have to write out all your questions? Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So
there's nothing about this job that's intuitive.
No, you got to write out your questions. You got to think about what their answer is going to be. And if it goes one of 3 ways, you got to be ready for each one of those answers. You got to have all your stuff sourced, all your material sourced. You got to be well prepared. That's obvious, right? And that's all substance. But what we're going to talk about is form, because you could have the greatest substance in the world, but if you lack form, you are going to lack impact. So form gives you impact. And so what I mean by form are the skills of cross-examination. Not so much the words or how you structure your sentence, but the skills. Like for learning the structure of cross, how to put together, how to walk them down the hallway and shut the doors, I strongly recommend Posner and Dodd, cross-examination, science and technique. But that does not teach you form. It teaches you substance. So what I mean by form, skills are leading questions only, 1 new fact per question. Looping, which means to establish a fact and repeat that fact in the next question. Cross-examining the present tense forces, the witness to visualize the story, forces the witness to visualize it, but more importantly, allows the jury to visualize it. Dropping the taglines like right, correct, isn't it true? Dropping all of the filler words like and, so, etc. Effectively using a flip chart. which means writing legibly. You will not use a flip chart if you do not practice. This is human nature because it is not comfortable. And then you'll be self-critical of your handwriting because it looks like a freaking, ransom note when you write on that paper. And, you overfill it, you underfill it anyway. So what I mean, if it's flip chart, I mean writing legibly and one topic per page, being intentional with your emotional state, right? Most people get aggressive and angry on cross. It's weird. You say cross, they're like, "Ugh, doctor." I'm like, whoa, check your tone. I mean, I see it all the time, in the training. And so there's only 2 emotions on cross, Monty. You know what those are? 2 dominant emotions.
Curious,
Curiosity, very good. What's the second one?
disappointment.
You got it, Monty. Look at you. See, this is what we call a learned student.
But the problem for me is no matter how much I know it and no matter how many depositions I take, sometimes when they say stuff, I still get mad and have trouble controlling that.
No,
So I need your help, Dan.
No, because every time you do that, you're giving that witness a little remote control with a little button on it. And as soon as you get frustrated, as soon as you get angry, you are letting them win. Okay? It's like paying attention to an objection. We just did a training with Satch Oliver and John Romano, and his depositions are trial. And when the person was practicing the cross, somebody had to be objection, form, objection, misstated the facts, objection. And Satch, you just ignore him. You just stop talking and then go on to the next one. No reaction, no, that's not a proper, you know what I mean? None of that. Just keep going. So it's a choice, Monty. Whether you allow them to push your buttons is your choice. And I can't, nobody can help you to make that choice. You just have to decide. It's like, it's like anger or embarrassment. Nobody can embarrass you. Nobody can, only if you feel it, right? Otherwise it's them being idiots. So anyways, so those are the key. Oh, also, bringing the jury in appropriately when you look to the jury and ask a question, because some people are comfortable doing that at long, with every question. I'm more of only on the impact statements do we do that. I think that's pretty much the key skills. So, but this cross is great because it calls the expert a lying sack of shit without saying it, and it can be adjusted to any witness. So this is a defense medical expert, but it can be adjusted to a biomechanics expert. Any expert, doesn't matter. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But right now, you're going to be Dr. Monte Tynes. You ready?
I'm ready.
Doctor, you're a board certified medical expert.
I am.
To become board certified, this requires advanced education.
Yeah.
This education, it takes place after medical school.
Yeah, medical school, residency, fellowships, passing the boards, continuing medical education.
But while you were in medical school, you did take classes.
Yeah.
One of the classes that you took was on how to conduct a proper medical evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, we learned how to do a medical evaluation.
Okay, so that's really, I call it segment 1. So I teach these in 4 segments. So that way it's easy to learn one at a time. And we teach these at boot camp. We do it by Zoom ahead of time to train. But then the first training is basically follow the leader so people can learn the pacing, the cadence, the emotional state control. And that's another thing I wanted to point out, though, is cadence. Notice that I'm speaking with cadence. I'm intentionally speaking slower because, first of all, everybody speeds up in trial. Because a lot of times I show people training materials and they're like, oh, it looks slow and methodical and mechanical. I'm like, oh, aren't you a genius? Yes, it is. And if you ever studied training and performance, it all basically, one of the things I always say is whatever movement you're doing, do it slower. See if you can do it slowly so you can feel every aspect of the movement as you are building your muscle memory, as you are building the training of skills. You got to slow down. All right, so back to cross-examination, Dr. Tynes. So now if we were in court right now, I would have a flip chart behind me, and I would be a blank page, and I would flip that blank page over, and the top of the next page, guess what it would say? Guess what it would say?
Proper.
Proper, yes. It would say proper. It would be underlined. And so I say, doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation, it must be impartial.
Yeah.
So I write down number 1, impartial. Then I write a number 2. and spacing it so it's going to take up the whole page. The 3 things I'm about to put down. So you got to think ahead about your spacing. Doctor, by impartial, what we mean is that you're not an advocate for either side.
Correct.
Doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation must not only be impartial, and I look at it, this is called glance control, so all the jury looks at it, but it must also be objective.
Yeah, I mean, I think objective and impartial are kind of the same thing.
Oh, aren't you a fucking genius? Yes, they're very close, but this part of the trilogy of the loop, okay? So just keep your thoughts to yourself unless I ask you a question. Okay.
Sure.
So then I write down objective, and then I write number 3. Doctor, by objective, what we mean is that you don't cherry pick the evidence to support a desired opinion.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation, it must not only be impartial and objective, but it must also be complete.
Yeah, you have to consider everything.
Exactly. Because by complete, what we mean is that you consider all relevant information.
Yeah.
So obviously that's also an example of looping, right? Repeating the statement in the next statement. Now, every juror knows, no matter how, what their memory is, how smart or not smart they may be, that proper medical evaluation is supposed to be impartial, objective, and complete. Doctor, the opposite of a proper medical evaluation, one that's impartial, objective, and complete, and I'm looking at the board, well, that would be a biased evaluation.
Yeah.
So I flip my page over, and guess what it says at the top, Monty?
Biased.
Monty, you're a really good student. I mean, you're very smart.
You said you've done this 15 times on podcasts. I've listened to it 15 times.
Oh, good. Now, I can't wait to hear how you incorporate it. Well, it's good to hear it over and over because repetition is the key to all learning.
Correct.
So, well, do you want me to be the doctor? If you think you know it?
No.
Okay. See, because you have to listen to it, but you have to practice it. Have you practiced it yet on an expert or not an expert, but like in a mock setting?
But I got my notes, so.
No, you got to have your notes. I'm not a no-note guy, okay? Notes are guidelines, but you got to know what you're saying or you won't have the cadence and the tempo and won't be listening too. If you're fucking too much posted on the board, you got to be listening. That's a key skill, listening. So, doctor, you're trained and you know that there are certain risks associated with a paid expert's choice to conduct a biased medical evaluation.
Yeah, if there's a risk to biased investigations.
Right. And one of those risks is that the jury could be misinformed. So I look over at the jury and say this about the patient's condition.
Yeah, that could be a risk of a biased investigation.
So I write number 1, misinformed, and I put a number 2. Doctor, you're trained and you know. So that's an example of stepping. You're trained and you know. So this is like a universal truth. That if a paid expert chooses to conduct a biased medical evaluation, not only could the jury be misinformed about the patient's condition, but they could also be misled as to the extent of the patient's injuries.
Yeah.
So then I write misled at number 2, and I put number 3. Doctor, you're trained and you know that if a paid expert chooses to conduct a biased medical evaluation, not only could the jury be misinformed about the patient's condition and misled as to the extent of the patient's injuries, but perhaps worst of all, they could be deceived into undervaluing the human harms and suffering that were caused.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have all the facts.
So, doctor, let me ask you this question. On December 14th, 2020, you had a choice to make. So tell us all, what did you choose to do?
Well, I mean, I always do a proper investigation.
So what you want us to believe is, in fact, that you followed your training and you did a proper medical evaluation. And I flipped the page over, it makes a lot of noise. One that was impartial, objective, and complete, like you were trained to do, and you didn't choose to violate your training and conduct a biased evaluation because, and I flip it back over, because you were aware of all the risks. Is that what you're telling us, doctor?
Yes.
All right. Well, let's see. So what this does is it draws a line in the sand too, because it tells the jury that this guy's a lying sack of shit. I'm about to prove it. And like Roger Dodd says, the dog ain't interested in the fish that don't flop.
Right.
That's right, Monty. All right. Well, Monty, that's it for us, buddy. It's been nice visiting you. And I'm going to enjoy my moment here. I have a 10:30 webinar with Eric Wilson, so I got a whole hour off. So what are you going to do to enjoy your day in Mississippi, Monty?
Oh, I'm going straight to a mediation. So
All right.
as soon as we get done.
I'm like, why are you wearing a tie? Why do you have the TLU t-shirt? I know you got to have at least a dozen of them. Oh, I know. Me too. It's such a struggle. All right, buddy.
Thanks for having me on, Dan.
I'll see you in a couple months, or like 45 days in Huntington Beach, buddy.
Sounds good.
Take care.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.